Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his small human vessel and watched the massive alien ship floating in front of them. The ship was 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was silver and gleaming and covered with strange symbols that hurt to look at directly. Jake had seen many alien ships before, but this one made him feel small and helpless. The ship belonged to the Galactic Council. These aliens controlled most of the galaxy, and they had decided what would happen to humanity after the war. The war had lasted 3 years and humans had fought hard, but they had lost. Now they had to face the consequences of their defeat, Commander. Lisa Hayes walked up to Jake and handed him a datapad. Her face was tired and angry. She had been his second-in-command for 5 years, and Jake trusted her more than anyone else in the fleet. Lisa had fought in every major battle of the war, and she had never backed down from a fight. "The Council has made their decision, Captain," Lisa said in a quiet voice. "They are calling it generous reparations for our aggression against their member species." Jake looked at the datapad and felt his stomach drop. The Council was giving humanity access to something called Debris Field. Omega 7, it was described as salvage rights to old battlefields where ancient wars had been fought. The Council claimed it contained valuable materials that humans could use to rebuild their civilization. "Debris Field," Jake said slowly. "They are giving us garbage." "That's exactly what they are giving us," Lisa replied. "Broken ships, burned-out engines, and weapons that stopped working centuries ago." The Zephyrian delegate called it a learning opportunity. The communication system crackled to life and a voice filled the bridge. The voice belonged to Vex Kaller, the tall crystalline being who served as the Council's military overseer. His species had been among the first to declare war on humanity when humans had tried to expand beyond their home system. "Captain Morrison." Vex Kaller's voice was like glass breaking. "Your species has shown remarkable violence for such a primitive civilization. The Council believes that working with refuse will teach your people the value of humility and patience." Jake wanted to respond with anger, but he knew it would accomplish nothing. The Council had already made their decision and humans had no choice but to accept it. The alternative was complete extinction, and Jake would not let that happen to his people. "We accept the Council's generous offer," Jake said through gritted teeth. "When do we begin our salvage operations?" "Immediately," Vex Kaller replied. "Your people will be divided into groups and sent to different debris fields across the Outer Rim. You will have no contact with the inner systems and no access to Council technology or markets. Consider this your final chance to prove that humanity deserves to exist." The communication ended and Jake looked out at the stars. The Outer Rim was the edge of known space where only the most desperate species tried to make a living. It was cold and empty and far from any help. The Council was sending humanity into exile and expecting them to disappear quietly. Chief Engineer Danny Brooks walked onto the bridge carrying a toolkit and looking excited despite everything that had happened. Danny was young, but he was the smartest person Jake had ever met. He could fix anything, and he had kept their ship running through the worst parts of the war. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data about these debris fields," Danny said. "The Council thinks they are giving us junk, but they might be wrong. Some of these wrecks are from species that fought wars thousands of years ago. Their technology might be different from what we know today." Jake looked at Danny with interest. "What do you mean different?" "I mean that old doesn't always mean worthless," Danny explained. "Sometimes old technology works in ways that new technology doesn't. The Council focuses on efficiency and standardization, but older species might have built things differently." Communications Officer Amy Carter called out from her station. "Captain, we are receiving reports from the other human colonies. They have all been given access to different scrap fields across the rim. The Council has scattered our people across dozens of systems." Jake nodded and felt a plan beginning to form in his mind. The Council thought they were being clever by separating humanity and giving them nothing but garbage. But they had made a mistake. They had given humans access to technology from species that no longer existed. Technology that the Council had forgotten about or never understood. "Amy, send encrypted messages to all human settlements," Jake ordered. Tell them to begin detailed scans of everything in their debris fields. I want to know what we are working with. Yes, sir. Amy replied and began typing rapidly at her console. Dr. Kate Sullivan entered the bridge carrying a medical scanner and looking puzzled. She had been the fleet's chief medical officer during the war, and she had saved countless lives. Now she was trying to understand the alien technology they would be working with. Captain, I've been examining some of the smaller debris pieces that the Council ship dropped off, Kate said. Some of this material contains biological components that I've never seen before. It's like some species integrated living tissue into their machines. Is it dangerous? Jake asked. I don't think so, Kate replied. But it suggests that some of these ancient species approach technology in ways that the current Council members never considered. They might have built things that work completely differently from modern alien ships. Jake walked to the main viewport and looked out at the debris field that would be their new home. Thousands of pieces of metal and machinery floated in the darkness. Each piece was from a different species and a different time. The Council saw it as worthless scrap, but Jake was beginning to see it as something else entirely. Lisa, how many people do we have total across all the human settlements? Jake asked. Lisa consulted her datapad. Approximately 2 million survivors, scattered across 47 different systems. Most of them are engineers, scientists, and military personnel who survived the war. 2 million of the smartest and most determined humans who ever lived, Jake said quietly. And the Council just gave us access to thousands of years of alien technology that they consider worthless. Danny looked up from his toolkit with a grin. Captain, are you thinking what I think you are thinking? Jake turned to face his crew. These people had followed him through the worst war in human history. They had never given up, and they had never stopped fighting even when defeat seemed certain. Now they were being given a chance to prove that humanity was far from finished. The Council thinks they have humiliated us, Jake said. They think we will spend our time picking through garbage and eventually fade away, but they have made a serious mistake. They have given us the raw materials to build something that this galaxy has never seen before. The crew looked at each other with growing excitement. They understood what Jake was suggesting, and they liked it. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. Now they had been given the ultimate challenge, and they were ready to meet it head-on. Outside the viewport, the debris field waited for them like a puzzle that needed to be solved. The Council had given them scrap and expected them to disappear. Instead, humanity was about to begin the greatest engineering project in their history. 3 months had passed since the Council had dumped humanity in the debris fields, and Captain Jake Morrison was beginning to see possibilities everywhere he looked. The makeshift settlement his crew had built on the largest asteroid in their assigned field was growing every day as more survivors arrived from other human colonies. What had started as a desperate survival mission was turning into something much bigger. Jake walked through the corridors of the workshop that Chief Engineer Danny Brooks had constructed from salvaged hull plates and broken alien machinery. The space was filled with the constant sound of welding torches and power tools as dozens of engineers worked to understand the technology they had been given. Danny had turned the workshop into a laboratory where the impossible was becoming routine. Captain, you need to see this right now, Danny called out from his workstation. He was surrounded by holographic displays showing ship designs that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen before. The designs were sleek and deadly and completely unlike anything humans or the current Council species had ever built. Danny's fingers moved across the holographic interface as he explained his discovery. I've been analyzing the structural composition of these hull fragments for weeks. Each species that fought in these ancient wars built their ships differently, but they all shared the same basic weaknesses. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez joined them at the workstation. Sam had been the fleet's best weapons specialist during the war, and he had spent the last 3 months studying every piece of alien weaponry they could find. His expertise was crucial to understanding how these ancient technologies could be combined. Zephyrians built their ships with energy shields that could stop almost any attack, Sam explained while pointing to a section of the display. But they made their shields so powerful that they drained too much energy from other systems. A sustained attack with simple kinetic weapons could overwhelm their power grid. And the Krolix species relied heavily on plasma cannons that could destroy entire fleets, Danny added. But they positioned all their weapons in the front of their ships, which left huge blind spots in their defensive coverage. A smaller ship attacking from the side could avoid their weapons completely. Dr. Kate Sullivan approached their group carrying a tablet full of biological scan results. She had been studying the organic components found in some of the wrecks, and her findings were changing how they thought about alien technology. Kate had discovered that some species had integrated living tissue into their machines in ways that the current council members had never attempted. The Nexari were the most interesting species I've encountered, Kate said as she showed them microscopic images of alien neural tissue. They connected their nervous systems directly to their ships, computer systems which gave them incredible reaction times and coordination. But it also created a single point of failure that could disable their entire fleet. Jake studied the rotating ship design on Danny's display. The proposed vessel was massive and angular and covered with hybrid weapon systems that combined technologies from multiple species. It was unlike anything that currently existed in the galaxy, and Jake could see why Danny was excited about the possibilities. How long would it take to build something like this? Jake asked. With our current resources and the people we have now, maybe 2 years, Danny replied. But if we can get cooperation from the other human settlements and share our research, we could cut that time significantly. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Amy, send encrypted messages to all human colonies. Tell them we're not just surviving out here anymore. We're building something that will make the galaxy remember why they should have treated U.S. with respect. Communications Officer Amy Carter nodded and began transmitting Jake's message to human settlements across the Outer Rim. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colony after colony reported that their engineers and scientists had been making similar discoveries about the ancient technologies in their debris fields. Chief Designer Elena Martinez arrived from the Kepler colony 2 weeks later with a team of structural engineers and a cargo ship full of promising salvage. Elena was known throughout human space as the most brilliant ship designer of her generation, and she had volunteered to help with the project as soon as she received Jake's message. Captain Morrison, what your people have discovered here is remarkable, Elena said as she examined Danny's designs. But I think we can make it even better. The Kepler field contains hull materials from a species called the Vorthari, who built their ships to adapt to different types of attacks in real time. Elena's fingers moved across the holographic display as she showed them how Vorthari adaptive armor could be integrated into their design. This armor can shift its molecular structure based on the type of incoming weapon. Energy weapons would be absorbed and redirected, while kinetic weapons would be deflected by hardened plates. Weapons Coordinator Rick Thompson arrived from the Titan colony with detailed scans of every alien weapon system his team had encountered. Rick had been a military engineer before the war, and he understood how to reverse engineer alien technology better than almost anyone else in human space. The Nexari plasma torpedo has a yield of 850 terajoules, Rick explained as he showed them weapon schematics. But it takes 47 seconds to charge between shots. My team has figured out how to modify the firing mechanism to reduce that time to 12 seconds while increasing the payload by 30%. The ship design evolved rapidly as more specialists arrived from different colonies. Dr. Patricia Wang from the New Eden settlement brought breakthrough research in artificial intelligence systems. She had successfully combined human creativity with alien computational power to create something entirely new. We've developed a hybrid AI system that can adapt to new threats in real time while maintaining human command authority, Patricia explained. It learns from each encounter and develops new strategies without overriding human decision-making. The asteroid facility expanded every day as new arrivals brought fresh ideas and resources. What had started as a simple salvage operation was becoming the most ambitious engineering project in human history. Jake walked through the growing complex and felt pride in what his species was accomplishing, the ship taking shape in their computer. Simulations was more than just a weapon. It was a declaration that humanity would not be dismissed or forgotten. The Council had given them scrap and expected them to disappear quietly. Instead, humans were preparing to build something that would force the galaxy to take notice. Jake stood in the main workshop and watched dozens of engineers from different colonies working together on systems that had never been combined before. They were solving problems that the galaxy's greatest minds had never even considered. The Council had made a serious mistake when they underestimated human ingenuity and determination. "Captain," Danny said as he approached with the latest design updates, "I think we're ready to begin actual construction. The preliminary designs are complete and we have enough materials to start building the primary hull sections." Jake looked at the holographic display showing their completed ship design. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council had given humanity access to thousands of years of alien technology because they thought it was worthless. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been. "Begin construction immediately," Jake ordered, "and send a message to every human settlement in the Rim. Tell them that Project Retribution is moving to the next phase." The asteroid designated XR7 had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck and looked down into the massive hollow chamber that his people had carved from solid rock. Inside that chamber, the skeleton of the most advanced warship ever conceived was taking shape piece by piece. 18 months had passed since construction began, and the project had grown far beyond anything Jake had originally imagined. Ships arrived weekly from human settlements across the Outer Rim, each one carrying precious materials, brilliant minds, and stories of discoveries that pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. The ship they were building had no official name yet, but everyone called it the Retribution. It was over 3 kilometers long and bristled with hybrid weapon systems that combined technologies from dozens of extinct species. The hull was a patchwork of different materials that had been carefully integrated to create something stronger than any single component. Chief Engineer Danny Brooks had become the unofficial leader of the construction effort. He moved through the work sites like a conductor directing an orchestra, coordinating the efforts of thousands of specialists who had never worked together before. Danny's ability to see how different technologies could fit together had made him invaluable to the project. "Captain, we've solved the power distribution problem," Danny announced as he approached Jake with a tablet full of technical diagrams. "The Zephyrian energy cores can't handle the load from all our weapon systems, but the Krolix backup generators can supplement them during combat operations." Jake studied the diagrams and marveled at the complexity of what his people were accomplishing. The ship's power system alone was more sophisticated than anything humans had built before the war. It combined energy sources from 6 different species and managed them through a network of adaptive controllers that could adjust power flow in real time. Chief Designer Elena Martinez had established her team in a section of the asteroid that had been converted into a design laboratory. Elena worked 18-hour days refining the ship's structure and solving problems that no engineer had ever encountered before. Her ability to visualize complex 3-dimensional relationships made her essential to the project's success. "The hull integration is proceeding faster than expected," Elena reported during the daily progress meeting. "We've successfully bonded Zephyrian armor plating with Krolix support beams using a new welding technique that works at the molecular level. The resulting structure is 40% stronger than either material alone." The weapon systems were taking shape under the direction of Rick Thompson, who had arrived from the Titan colony with a team of military engineers. Rick had studied every weapon design in the debris fields, and he was creating combinations that would have been impossible for any single species to develop. "The main battery will consist of modified Nexari plasma cannons integrated with Vorth retargeting systems," Rick explained to the assembled team leaders. "The plasma cannons can fire every 12 seconds instead of the original 47. seconds, and the VOR-3 targeting system can track multiple enemies simultaneously. Dr. Patricia Wang had made the most significant breakthrough in the ship's control systems. Her team had successfully created an artificial intelligence that combined human intuition with alien computational power. The AI could process information faster than any organic mind while maintaining the creativity and adaptability that made humans effective in combat. The hybrid AI system is functioning beyond our expectations, Patricia reported. It can analyze enemy ship designs and develop counter-strategies in real time, but it always presents options to the human commanders rather than making decisions independently. The ship's medical bay was being designed by Dr. Kate Sullivan, who had discovered that some alien species had developed healing technologies that worked on humans. Kate's integration of biological and mechanical systems was creating a medical facility that could treat injuries that would have been fatal just a few years earlier. The Nexari bioregeneration systems can accelerate human healing by a factor of 10, Kate explained. Combined with our own medical knowledge, we can create a medical bay that can keep people fighting even after severe injuries. Jake walked through the construction areas and watched thousands of people working with a determination that impressed him every day. These were the survivors of humanity's greatest defeat, and they were channeling their anger and grief into creating something that would ensure their species never faced extinction again. The ship's bridge was being constructed in the heart of the vessel, surrounded by layers of armor and defensive systems. The bridge design abandoned the sterile efficiency of alien command centers in favor of something that felt natural to human operators. Every control surface was positioned for maximum effectiveness during combat operations. Navigator Tony Clark had spent months studying alien navigation systems, and he was creating a helm station that could plot courses through space in ways that no alien species had ever attempted. Tony's understanding of three-dimensional movement had made him invaluable to the project. The navigation system can calculate jump coordinates that exploit gravitational anomalies that alien ships can't detect, Tony explained. We can appear and disappear from battle zones in ways that will confuse enemy targeting systems. The ship's communication array was being designed by Amy Carter, who had discovered that some ancient species had developed communication technologies that could penetrate any known jamming system. Amy's work would ensure that the Retribution could coordinate with other human forces even in the most chaotic battle conditions. The communication system uses quantum entanglement principles that the current Council species don't understand, Amy reported. We can maintain contact with human settlements across the galaxy, even if enemy forces try to block our transmissions. Jake stood in the main assembly area and watched as hull sections were carefully moved into position by teams of engineers using alien gravity manipulation technology. The work was dangerous and precise, and it required perfect coordination between dozens of different teams. The ship's defensive systems were being integrated by specialists who had arrived from the Centauri colony. These engineers had discovered shield technologies that could adapt to different types of attacks while maintaining full power to other systems. The defensive grid would make the Retribution nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. The adaptive shields can shift their frequency to counter any energy weapon while maintaining structural integrity against kinetic attacks, reported the lead defensive systems engineer. Enemy forces will need to develop entirely new weapon types to penetrate our defenses. Jake realized that they were creating more than just a warship. They were building a symbol of human resilience and ingenuity that would change how the galaxy viewed their species. The Council had given them scrap and expected them to disappear quietly. Instead, humanity was preparing to announce its presence in a way that no one could ignore. The construction continued around the clock as teams worked in shifts to maintain constant progress. The ship was scheduled for completion in 6 months, and Jake knew that every day brought them closer to a confrontation that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution and felt the power of the most advanced warship ever built humming beneath his feet. 2 years of work had led to this moment, and Jake could hardly believe what humanity had accomplished. The ship's systems responded to his crew's commands with a precision that surpassed anything in their previous experience. The bridge was exactly as they had designed it, built for human intuition rather than alien efficiency. Every control surface was positioned where human hands could reach it naturally, and every display showed information in ways that human minds could process quickly. The crew had trained for months on the integrated systems, and they moved with the confidence of people who knew their equipment perfectly. "All stations report ready, Captain," announced Navigator Tony Clark from his position at the helm. Tony had become an expert in the ship's revolutionary navigation system, and he could plot courses that would confuse any enemy force. The hybrid technology allowed them to move through space in ways that no alien species had ever attempted. They had chosen the remote Cygnus sector for their first real test because it was far from any inhabited systems. Jake wanted to verify that all the ship's systems worked properly before they announced their presence to the galaxy. The last thing humanity needed was for their ultimate weapon to fail during its first encounter with enemy forces. The ship's artificial intelligence system had been monitoring space traffic throughout the sector, and it detected something that would provide the perfect test of their capabilities. 3 Zephyrian patrol ships were approaching their position, apparently investigating the unusual energy readings that the Retribution was producing. "Incoming vessels on long-range sensors," reported Communications Officer Beth Adams from her station. Beth had learned to operate the ship's advanced communication array, and she could intercept alien transmissions from incredible distances. 3 Zephyrian cruisers approaching at standard patrol speed. Jake smiled as he realized that these would be the same type of ships that had enforced humanity's banishment 2 years earlier. The Zephyrians had been among the most arrogant species in the Galactic Council, and they had taken particular pleasure in humanity's defeat. Now they would be the first to learn what humans could accomplish when they were properly motivated. "They're scanning us, Captain," Beth reported. "The lead ship is transmitting a standard identification request." Jake looked at the tactical display and saw 3 sleek alien vessels approaching in a standard patrol formation. These ships represented everything that humanity had been fighting against during the war. They were fast and powerful and crewed by species that considered humans to be primitive barbarians who had no right to exist in civilized space. "Mr. Thompson, are all weapon systems ready for testing?" Jake asked. Weapons Coordinator Rick Thompson checked his displays and nodded. "All systems are online and functioning within normal parameters. The hybrid weapon array is ready for combat operations." The Zephyrian ships moved closer, and Jake could see their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light from the nearby star. These were the same type of vessels that had destroyed human colonies during the war, and Jake felt old anger rising in his chest. The time for running and hiding was over. "Incoming transmission," Beth announced. "The Zephyrian commander is demanding our immediate surrender." Jake activated the main view screen and saw the face of a tall crystalline being whose features flickered with arrogance and contempt. The alien's voice filled the bridge with the same condescending tone that Jake remembered from the council's judgment 2 years earlier. "Unknown vessel, you will stand down immediately," the Zephyrian commander transmitted. "Your primitive species has no right to possess technology of this sophistication. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Jake felt his crew tense around him as they heard the familiar arrogance in the alien's voice. These people had fought through humanity's darkest hour, and they had spent 2 years building something that would ensure their species never faced extinction again. The time for diplomacy was over. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. "Tell them we are conducting salvage operations under the terms of our agreement with the Galactic Council." The Zephyrian commander's response was immediate and predictable. "You will comply with our demands or face the consequences." Your species was granted access to refused materials, not advanced military technology. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had given everything to build this ship, and they deserved to see it tested against the enemies who had tried to destroy them. The Retribution represented humanity's refusal to accept defeat, and it was time to show the galaxy what that meant. "Mr. Thompson, target their lead vessel's shield generators," Jake ordered. "Single shot, minimum power setting." Rick's fingers moved across his control panel and the ship's hybrid weapon system came online. The weapon combined technologies from 6 different extinct species, and it could fire energy beams that bent the laws of physics in ways that current Council species had never encountered. The Retribution fired a single beam that seemed to shimmer as it crossed the space between the ships. The energy struck the Zephyrian cruiser's shields, and something impossible happened. The alien ship's defensive systems flickered and died as their energy was absorbed and redirected by the human weapon. Silence filled the communication channel for several long seconds before the Zephyrian commander spoke again. His voice was filled with shock and growing fear as he realized that his supposedly invincible shields had been defeated by a single shot from the human vessel. "Impossible," the alien commander transmitted. "Our shields are rated to withstand any known weapon in the galaxy. How did you penetrate our defenses so easily?" Jake felt satisfaction wash over him as he realized that their plan was working perfectly. The Retribution had been designed specifically to counter the weaknesses of every known alien ship class, and the Zephyrians had just discovered that their technology was no longer superior. "You gave us scrap," Jake replied calmly. "We built something better." The tactical display showed the 3 Zephyrian ships backing away from the Retribution as their commanders tried to understand what had just happened. Their weapons were charging, but Jake knew that conventional alien technology could not penetrate the ship's adaptive defenses. "Captain, they're preparing to fire," Tony reported from the helm. "Let them," Jake replied. "I want to see how our defensive systems perform under actual combat conditions." The Zephyrian ships opened fire with their plasma cannons and energy torpedoes. The weapons struck the Retribution's shields and simply disappeared as the adaptive defense grid analyzed each attack and developed appropriate countermeasures. The human ship continued moving forward without any apparent damage. "Old defensive systems functioning normally," reported the Chief Defensive Systems Officer. "Enemy weapons are being absorbed and redirected through the shield matrix." The Zephyrian commander's voice returned to the communication channel, but now it was filled with panic instead of arrogance. "This is impossible. No single ship can withstand concentrated fire from 3 Council vessels." Jake realized that word of this encounter would spread throughout the galaxy within hours. The species that had dismissed humanity as primitive would now have to reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities. The Retribution had proven that it could defeat the Council's best ships without taking any damage. "Retreat to your home systems," Jake transmitted to the Zephyrian ships. "Tell your leaders that humanity has returned to the galaxy and we will not be dismissed again." The 3 alien vessels turned and fled at maximum speed, their commanders already transmitting reports of the encounter to their superiors. Jake knew that the galaxy would never be the same after this day. News of the Retribution's encounter with the Zephyrian patrol ships spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major species in the Galactic Council had received detailed reports about the human vessel that had effortlessly defeated 3 of their most advanced warships. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians were now scrambling to understand how their former enemies had built something so far beyond their own technology. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the observation lounge of the Retribution and watched as dozens of alien ships gathered at the edge of the Cygnus sector. Representatives from every major council species had arrived to see the human vessel for themselves, and their growing fear was obvious in their cautious approach patterns. Ships that had once enforced the Council's will through superior firepower now maintained respectful distances from the human warship. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session for the first time in over a century. The assembly that had once judged humanity and found them wanting was now forced to reconsider their position in light of what the humans had accomplished. Ambassador Helen Carter had been chosen to represent humanity at the session, and she carried with her the full authority to negotiate on behalf of all human settlements. Helen stood in the council chambers facing the assembled representatives, of 47 different species. The same aliens who had sentenced humanity to exile now looked at her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright fear. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically, and everyone in the chamber understood the implications. The Galactic Council recognizes Ambassador Carter, announced the council moderator, a floating gaseous being whose species had remained neutral during the human war. You may present your statement to the assembly. Helen looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had once considered her species beneath their notice. The Zephyrian delegate was notably absent, apparently too embarrassed by his fleet's performance to face the human representative directly. The other species watched her with the careful attention of predators who had suddenly discovered they were no longer at the top of the food chain. Honorable delegates, Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. 2 years ago, this council banished humanity to the outer rim and provided us with access to debris fields that you considered worthless. You expected us to fade into obscurity and eventually disappear from galactic affairs entirely. The Krolix military commander, a massive insectoid being with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his approval. Your species was granted generous terms, considering your aggressive actions during the territorial disputes. The council showed mercy by allowing you to survive at all. Helen smiled as she activated a holographic display showing the Retribution's encounter with the Zephyrian patrol ships. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the human vessel effortlessly defeated 3 council warships without sustaining any damage. The implications of what they were seeing sent ripples of concern through the chamber. We used only the materials you provided, Helen replied smoothly. Our engineers found ways to make broken things work together in ways that none of your species had ever considered. If our success threatens you, perhaps you should examine why your own technological development has remained stagnant for so long. The Nexari delegate, a tall being with purple skin and multiple eyes, leaned forward in his seat. Your species has violated numerous galactic treaties regarding weapons development. The technology you have created is too dangerous for any single species to control. We have violated no treaties, Helen responded firmly. Everything we built came from the debris fields that you gave us access to. Our only crime was having the imagination to see possibilities where you saw only worthless scrap. Behind Helen's diplomatic words was an implicit threat that every delegate in the chamber understood perfectly. The Retribution was not alone in human space. Reports had been arriving from the Outer Rim describing similar construction projects at other human settlements. The species that had scattered humanity across the galaxy to weaken them had inadvertently provided the resources for multiple shipbuilding programs. The Vorthari representative, a crystalline being whose species had developed the adaptive armor, technology that the humans had incorporated into their ship, spoke with genuine curiosity. How did your engineers manage to integrate technologies from so many different species? Our own scientists have attempted similar projects for centuries without success. Helen's response revealed the fundamental difference between human and alien approaches to technology. Your species developed technology in isolation, each one jealously guarding their secrets and refusing to share knowledge. Humans approach problems by combining different ideas and building on each other's work. We see cooperation where you see competition. The session continued for hours as delegate after delegate questioned Helen about human capabilities and intentions. The aliens were clearly struggling to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive had managed to surpass their own technological achievements in just 2 years. The council that had once held absolute power was facing the reality that their dominance was no longer assured. The turning point came when the Andromedan delegate, whose species controlled the galaxy's largest shipyards, made an unexpected proposal. Perhaps we have misjudged humanity's potential. Your approach to technology integration shows promise that could benefit all species in the galaxy. Other delegates began to voice similar opinions as they realized that opposing humanity might be more dangerous than accepting them as equals. The species that had fought for millennia to maintain their positions in the galactic hierarchy were being forced to acknowledge that a new power had emerged from the refuse they had discarded. The final vote was closer than anyone had expected. But the result was unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and privileges that such membership provided. The Outer Rim territories would become humanity's sovereign space, and all restrictions on human expansion would be permanently lifted. Jake watched the proceedings from the Retribution's bridge and felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The aliens had intended to humiliate humanity by giving them nothing but scrap and expecting them to disappear quietly. Instead, they had provided the raw materials for humanity's greatest achievement and ensured that their species would never again be dismissed as insignificant. "Captain," Communications Officer Beth Adams reported from her station, "we're receiving messages from human settlements across the rim. 7 more ships similar to the Retribution are nearing completion at different colonies." Jake nodded as he realized that humanity's transformation was far from complete. The galaxy had learned to respect human ingenuity, but they had not yet seen the full extent of what humanity could accomplish when properly motivated. The Retribution had been built from the discarded dreams of extinct species, but the ships, now under construction, would incorporate lessons learned from their first success. "Send a message to all human settlements," Jake ordered. "Tell them that Phase 1 is complete. The galaxy now knows that humanity has returned, and we will never again accept second-class status." The stars outside the bridge windows seemed brighter as Jake contemplated humanity's future. The Council had given them scrap and expected them to fade away quietly. Instead, they had forged that refuse into the foundation of a new galactic power that would ensure their species' survival for generations to come. The galaxy would remember this lesson about underestimating human determination and creativity. In the depths of space, human shipyards continued their work, turning the galaxy's forgotten technologies into tools that would reshape the balance of power forever. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the species that had once dismissed them as primitive would learn to respect the ingenuity that had transformed their refuse into humanity's greatest triumph.